Today on Television Washington, Obama presses Israel, Palestinians on roadmap obligations. Gates downplays North Korean threat. Top cleric, U.S., Israel, proxies behind bombing in Iran. Ahmadinejad, no one can do a damn thing about Iran's nuclear dossier. Mousavi, U.S.-Iran relations, not taboo anymore. And Minister, do not make the enemies happy by creating doubts about the health of the election. These stories and more at televisionwashington.com.
Today in Washington. U.S. President Obama yesterday pressed Israel to halt settlement construction in the West Bank and urged Palestinians to reduce anti-Israel incitement. Following talks with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas at the White House, Obama made clear that he would continue to push Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to accept the creation of a Palestinian state. Obama said, quote,
"Keep in mind, we can move this process forward if all the parties are willing to take on the responsibilities and meet the obligations that they've already committed to."
He stressed that Israel's obligations under a 2003 Middle East peace roadmap include stopping settlements and making sure that there's a viable potential Palestinian state. Obama also said that Palestinians had to do more to bolster their security forces and reduce the incitement and anti-Israel sentiments that he said was sometimes spread in schools and mosques. Abbas said that his government was fully committed to all our obligations under the roadmap. U.S. Defense Secretary Robert Gates said today that North Korea's nuclear and missile tests this week pose a problem for the international community, but that they do not constitute a crisis or require a U.S. military buildup in the region. Gates told reporters that North Korea's actions merit a response, but that diplomatic measures were the first choice. He added, quote, "I don't believe that anybody in the administration thinks there is a crisis." At the same time, Gates called Pyongyang's actions this week provocative and accompanied by very aggressive rhetoric. North Korea test-fired another short-range missile off its east coast today and warned that it would take more self-defense measures if the United Nations Security Council punished it for its latest nuclear test. Today's top stories. Ministers of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries yesterday decided to keep the group's output steady as signs of economic recovery gave hope for higher oil prices. While some members of the 12-member group voiced concern over high oil inventories, Saudi Arabia's oil minister Ali Al-Naimi said that demand was rising. A recent rally has taken oil prices back above $60 per barrel. The group's target currently stands at 24.84 million barrels per day. A senior Russian diplomat yesterday accused the United States of exaggerating the missile threat posed by Iran. Alexander Sternik, a senior diplomat at Russia's embassy in London, made the remarks during a speech on America's plans to place an anti-missile defense shield in Eastern Europe, which Washington says is meant to deter a missile attack by Iran and other rogue states. Sternik predicted that there would be no threats from the Middle East for at least a decade to come. Moscow has opposed Washington's plans to base 10 missile interceptors in Poland and a radar in the Czech Republic, saying that the system is a threat to Russia's national security. Ayatollah Sayed al-Khatami, member of the Assembly of Experts who led Friday prayers in Tehran today, said in his second sermon that arrogant powers' proxies were responsible for yesterday's deadly bombing in a Shiite mosque in the southeastern city of Zahedan. He added, quote, "Without doubt, America and Israel are involved in this incident through their ungodly Wahhabi and Salafi accomplices." The semi-official Fars news agency quotes him as saying, "We must beware of the enemy's plots aimed at sowing discord between Shias and Sunnis. We must have no doubt that the powerful Islamic system will arrest the perpetrators of this crime and sentence them to the severest of punishments." Turning to the upcoming presidential election, Ayatollah Khatami stressed the importance of the people's participation and that the June 12th election differed in one sense from other elections, and that this election was not about electing just one individual, but rather one of electing a managing group. He then urged everyone to come forward and vote, saying that voting was a political imperative.
Today in election news. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, in a meeting with Iran's scientific elite at Tehran's Milad International Exhibition Hall, said today that the pressure sustained by his government over the nuclear issue had been 10 times more than the pressures that Iran's government of the time had to bear during the move to nationalize Iran's oil under Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh in 1952. Saying that the debate on Iran's nuclear dossier has come to an end, he added, quote, "Today, no one can do a damn thing about this." After the nuclear issue was over and done with, he said Iran had sent a message to the US saying, quote, "We are ready to talk, but only about the management of the world and how to resolve world problems." About the contention that Iran is in a weak position and the US in a strong one, he addressed the Americans directly, saying, quote, "That ship has sailed and that genie has left that bottle." And this is a wise and realistic perspective. Ahmadinejad also addressed his election rivals' criticisms of his government and said that those who hurl such criticisms think that a flower garden was handed to us 4 years ago. He added, quote, "What has happened? What do you think is inside the White Presidency building that you are willing to trample all ethics underfoot to arrive there? However much I searched, I found nothing worthwhile there." Sadegh Masouli, Iran's interior minister, in a pre-sermon speech delivered at Tehran University, the venue of Friday prayers, today said that for the first time ever it has been announced clearly that each presidential candidate can have a representative at each ballot box. According to Fars news agency, while emphasizing that one must not make the enemy happy by creating doubts about the health of the election, Masouli said that these representatives would not only be allowed to be present during voting, but also during the counting of the votes. Meanwhile, Abbas Ali Khodai, the Guardian Council spokesperson, also told Fars news agency in an interview today, quote, "If the campaign publicity of the candidates and their supporters should include lies or exaggerations in ways that would disrupt the election process, the Guardian Council, bearing in mind publicities that are illegal, will have a say about the final approval of the results of the ballot boxes and the election as a whole." Also today, Sayyid Reza Modarresi Yazdi, a theologian member of the Guardian Council, said that Iran's presidential election is, quote, "an exercise in the show of strength and a renewal of covenant with Islam and the Quran." He went on to compare voting to carrying out a jihad in the name of Islam and added, quote, "In the system of the Islamic Republic, the people have the power to choose by voting the number 2 person in the government, namely the head of the executive branch of the government." Presidential candidate Mir Hossein Mousavi told Front correspondents in a news conference today that relations between the US and Iran have ceased to be a taboo and called for the creation of a more conductive basis for them. He explained that if this issue proceeds in an appropriate way, then evidently these relations would also move towards improvement. About whether or not he would be willing to hold direct talks with President Obama should the conditions be prepared, he said, quote, "If the conditions and the possibilities are prepared and we witness more signs which point to progress in this matter, I have no taboos about talking and debating." He also said that in his prospective government, Iran would move towards increasing its interactions with the world and decreasing tensions. Mousavi also noted as very effective what he called, quote, "the divergence in America's tone," and added, quote, "If there is candor in the tone that America's new president has expressed, it could pave the way for further progress in this matter." Mousavi also reminded that Iran has many problems with the US, and it would be, quote, "unrealistic to think that these problems would be resolved at once." He went on to say that a realistic attitude could act to gradually solve the problems between the two countries. These stories and more at televisionwashington.com.